going to invite up Juliana Ray, who is my personal mindfulness coach of many years. And she has been a 20-year apprentice of Shinzen. So I thought, let's have Juliana introduce Shinzen. So you know what's going to happen. He's going to share some wisdom with you. We said Shinzen, within a window of time, please share whatever wisdom you think would best serve us. And that's what he's going to do. And then after that, before you go back into your designing, we're going to give you a couple tips from how to move from your brainstorming into your prototyping that I think might really help you out. So at this point, could we please give a warm welcome to Juliana Ray? Please. Great.
Thank you, John. So yeah, I'm Juliana. I am on the team at the Flourishing Leadership Institute, and I am the co-founder of Unified Mindfulness. Unified Mindfulness is an interesting system. It is both an approach to contemplative practice, how to train in contemplative practice, and it is also a meta-analysis of all contemplative practices. It's a classification system for all contemplative practices, and that gives a level of thoroughness and precision that really distinguishes it. And this man is the guy who designed it. And I cannot tell you knowing this man, how that has radically transformed my life in ways I could never, ever have imagined. I just feel endless gratitude for that opportunity to have connected and trained with him all these years. So I'm really looking forward to having him share with you his vast experience. Both he comes at it from many levels, but he's been a teacher for about 50 years of meditation, and he's also a consultant in neuroscience. He is very interested in the relationship between contemplative practices and modern science, and that is the message he's going to communicate to you here today, and I look forward to us all sharing in it. So welcome, Shinzen Young.
Okay. So, riding on the momentum of the work that we've been doing, I'm going to ask you to think back to a very, very special experience that you may have had sometime in your life. Now, I'm going to say that many human beings, probably most, have had the kind of experience I'm about to describe. But it is not the case that every human being has had this experience. So you may be able to remember something like this in your life, but if you don't, that's perfectly okay. So it could have happened under a time of great stress, or it could have happened under the time of the opposite of great stress. Those are the two typical circumstances under which this happens. And what the this is time slows down. You are overcome with a sense of profound tranquility, connectedness, and a sense that you have everything that you could possibly need. And there may be accompanying that an action that is just the perfect thing to do, that spontaneously manifests. And if it's under one of those circumstances of great stress, it might be a perfect play in sports, or it might be what you did to save your life. So this is an extraordinary kind of experience. As I say, it doesn't happen to everyone. But if you can remember something like that, we're going to call that a spontaneous, momentary experience of transcendence. So now we're going to dream. Those of you that can remember having this kind of experience, We're going to dream. I would like you to imagine what it would be like to live in that state 24/7 without effort. What would be the implications of that in terms of your experience and in terms of how you carry yourself in the world, how you're acting, how you're behaving? So I think those of you that have had this kind of experience would agree that that to be able to live from that place would be utterly extraordinary. So let's give a name to the ability to live in that place without effort. I'm going to call it, just to give a name to it, consciousness literacy. So what is the purpose of becoming literate? The goal in becoming literate is not to just be literate, if we look at normal literacy. The goal in being literate is so that you can read good books. So there is a major book that you can directly read if you are one of those extraordinary people that live 24/7 in a state of transcendence. Now, I can tell you about the book, even if you are not one of those people, but hearing about the book is a little bit like looking at the menu in a restaurant. That's not really at all the same as ordering a meal or taking a meal. So the main book that you want to read that becomes available to you with consciousness literacy, I'm going to call it the Book of Human Flourishing. The title of the book would be, What is Human Flourishing? I'm going to suggest to you that that book has 5 chapters. And each of those chapters is divided into 4 sections. The 5 chapters outline the main independent dimensions of human flourishing. So it gives a dimensional analysis. If you have a background in science, you would know that this is analogous to giving you the atoms or the basic degrees of freedom for this topic. What's interesting is that each of the 4 sections gives you a deeper perspective on each of those 5 basic dimensions of human flourishing. So would you like me to tell you about the book? I think you'd like me to tell you about it, and I will. But remember, that's not the same as reading. We'll talk about directly reading it for yourself. We'll talk about that in a moment. So the 5 chapters are relief. That means how to transcend suffering. Fulfillment is another chapter. That's how to attain fulfillment. Wisdom is understanding yourself at all levels, including the deepest level. Mastery is how to master behaviors, positive behavior change. And service is a spontaneous call to serve from love. So the surface chapters, the surface sections rather in this book, each give you forms of relief, transcendence, wisdom, mastery, and service that anyone can understand. And those are important. You ask the average person, what would make me happy? And they'll tell you a bunch of things. And it's highly probable that the person in the street will mostly name things from the first sections in each one of these chapters. However, there are deeper forms for each one of these. And what is very interesting is what the deepest forms are. Those are the ones that are not necessarily evident to most people, but they're very, very important. For example, just to give you one of the chapters, the chapter called Relief from Suffering. If you ask most people what would be a relief from suffering for them, they'll give some condition in the world that they would like changed, which is an important and legitimate dimension of relief. What they probably won't realize is that at the deepest level, there's a form of relief from physical, emotional, or mental suffering that does not require changing any circumstance in the world. And it does not entail turning your attention away from the discomfort or palliating that discomfort in some way. There's actually a way to escape into pain as opposed to escape from it. Now, that's a very deep view. So, would it be important, let me just ask you, to be able to do that on occasion? What do you think? Do you think that there might be circumstances where you can't palliate and you can't turn away, and you would like to experience the pain with great poignancy and rather little problem? Well, someone who has attained in consciousness literacy knows how to do that, but they also know how to deal with circumstances. How about wisdom, understand yourself? So you can understand yourself in a personal, biographical way, but there's also a sort of collective unconscious that's deep within us that would be a deeper understanding of who you are. But at the deepest level, you would understand an identity that transcends your mind and body experience. And of course, if you have attained consciousness literacy, then that would pretty naturally lead to that calling to serve from love, because you would have you would have seen that the deepest part of you is actually directly connected to all of creation, and eternally so. And so you're always looking out at yourself, and you have a natural sense of fraternity and sorority with all of creation. And that leads to a natural calling to serve from that place of oneness. So, what does it take to attain consciousness literacy? Is this something that is feasible? Could you do it? Do you know people who have? Well, you do know people who have. There are people in this room who have. I have. What does it take at this point in history to attain consciousness literacy? Well, as it was mentioned, I work in the neuroscience field. So when we evaluate people's meditation experience, to be an experienced meditator takes about, the metric is about 10,000 hours of formal practice. Now, there's also a common metric in expertise in the world to become an expert in something. About how long does it take? Typically, well, people will often give you a ballpark of 10 years. So if you practiced meditation for 10 years and you did about 10,000 hours of formal practice. In general, is that going to be enough to attain consciousness literacy? No. It, in general, is not. So this seems like pretty bad news. Don't worry, I'm going to give you some not so bad news. But we're going to be honest. What I'm calling consciousness literacy, which, to repeat, is the ability to read the book called What is Human Flourishing? And I'm going to suggest to you that if enough human beings can directly read that book, all the good things that we've been talking about that we want to happen are very likely to happen. And if enough human beings cannot read that book, maybe all the good things we're talking about are not going to be enough to prevail against the negative forces that are so obviously in ascendance on this planet. So now we're talking about a whole interplay of good news and bad news. Okay, I just told you something that, well, so what do you need? Okay, if 10,000 hours in 10 years isn't enough, what is likely to be enough? 2 to 4 times that much. So that means it is feasible. I wasn't bragging when I said I've done that. It just means I put in 50 years of intensive practice. So that's a bittersweet experience. The sweet part is, oh my God, I'm 10 times happier than I ever would have imagined possible in my wildest dreams when I started. That's sweet. The not so sweet point is that I look out at the world, I realize just about anyone could do that if they allocated the amount of time and energy that I put into this endeavor. Would it be worth it? Would you say it's worth that much time and energy to be successful? Yes, you would. If God came to me and said, you're going to have a choice. You're going to make millions of dollars, be mega famous, have every success that normal people call success, and you're going to live a long time, but I'm going to take you back in time, and you're going to not make that decision to be a meditator. You're going to make a different decision. So here's your choice. You can live one day today knowing what you currently know as the result of having made that choice. Or you can live your life as it would have been otherwise, but with all of this success and power, and you'll live a very long time. So what do you want? One day of knowing what you now know at 73 years old, and then I'm going to kill you. Or you're going to live to 100 and you will have been wealthy and famous and had all those goodies. This is a no-brainer. I'll take the one day. It's that valuable. So, okay, looks like we've got some good news, bad news stuff. What I'm describing is feasible, but currently, it entails a very significant allocation of time and energy towards this goal. So then it looks like maybe this is bad news, that it's really not feasible that this is going to be relevant to solving problems on this planet. Well, let me give you some more encouraging news. As was mentioned, I have 2 careers. I have a scientist career and I have a meditation teacher career. That means that my approach to meditation is profoundly informed by the spirit of modern science. And everything that I know in my gut, in my belly, everything that I know as a critical thinker, informed by the spirit of science, tells me that there is a smarter way to work that would allow large numbers of people to directly read the book called Human Flourishing. What is human flourishing? Everything that I know about science tells me this is feasible, and I have some very specific ideas about how we can work smart to achieve this. And I have exactly 1 minute left to talk to you. So clearly, I'm not going to be able to do that, although my stuff is all over the, I'm not going to be able to go into the specifics of how we might work smart. My message to you is that, that I'm quite convinced it's feasible. So what that means is that it is feasible that large numbers of people with a relatively short investment of time and energy can abide in that state that I asked you to recall. What would it be like if 24/7 you were able to maintain, and it wasn't a moment of transcendence, it was a lifetime as you're bopping around in the world of having everything you need and being safe and in contact with absolute tranquility, the still point of the turning world that T.S. Eliot talked about. That is feasible, I believe. So what can, the theme here is what can business do? What can you as primarily business people do to foster? So I have a personal dream. My personal dream is that what I'm calling consciousness literacy, that there's a worldwide consciousness literacy movement. And significant numbers of people are able to participate in that. And all the good things that we have been talking about will come as a consequence of that. So what's an action piece that you could do to help this along? Well, for one thing, those of you that would be motivated, you might consider taking on a serious meditation practice that incorporates some of these work smart principles, or even doesn't, but you hold as a goal the consciousness literacy. So you can take that on for yourself. And if you're interested, Juliana is here, but there's many, many good meditation teachers in the world. If you want to talk to a couple people that are here that have done that, well, John, also Scott Lowry has worked with Juliana. So those would be some people you can talk to, and maybe you would take on this practice. But even if you don't take on an industrial strength meditation practice, there's still something that you can do. You can be on the lookout for people that are doing the research for working smarter in meditation. And this is being done now at universities all over the world, including Harvard Medical School, Carnegie Mellon. Those are a couple of the places I'm affiliated with. So you can do things to support the research that I believe probably within a decade or two will come up with a a way of working dramatically smarter, which will then accelerate the flourishing of this planet. And that's what I have to say about that.
You have space to take a few questions.
Sure.
We have a weekly meditation offering at our organization of 140 people. And while a lot of people think meditation is a good idea, it's really hard to get a critical mass coming to that weekly meditation. I'm wondering if you know any practices that organizations have implemented to help boost meditation in their workplace, or any other tips you might have. Thank you.
So tips on how to bring meditation into your organization. There's a lot we can say about that. One thing that you might consider is to give people meditation techniques that they can do while they're going about their daily activities. See, the problem with the word meditation is it has a connotation and it has a denotation. And the connotation is that you're sitting with your eyes closed, perhaps trying to chill out, withdrawing from the world, a special posture, and maybe even a special circumstance, like quiet room or something. That's the connotation of the word meditation. But I can promise you that none of that is required for meditation. If you want to think of a different image of meditation, think of a workout where you're exercising muscles. And in the case of meditation, you're actually exercising 3 kinds of muscle: concentration power, sensory clarity, and equanimity. These are technical terms. Don't think you understand them just by hearing the words. But if you want to go into detail as to what they mean, you can look up what I've said on the internet. So if you think about practice not as, okay, we're going to all get still and chill, but rather that we're doing something to develop and apply certain core attentional skills, you can give people techniques that they can do while they're going about their life activities. And then you can show them how to apply those techniques to personal and professional goals. And then you follow up as an organization as to what worked and didn't work for those personal and professional goals. That's the beginning of a long list of possibilities.
Specific to your research, is it exclusive to the practice of meditation, or is it inclusive of other modalities like transcendence or just other modalities? And specifically, I wanted to also ask if you have a book. Is this outlined in a book, the 5 chapters that you referred to, or is this?
So you want to read about the book. Then you can read my book called The Science of Enlightenment. I talk about that there. And also in my upcoming manual for unified mindfulness, which we're working on, I actually have this periodic chart of happiness elements. It's analogous to a periodic table of the chemical elements. And then I show for each of the 20 dimensions the plausible mechanism whereby the 3 skills, concentration, clarity, and equanimity, will maximize that particular dimension. So that's going to be in the manual of unified mindfulness, which is what we're working on now. But a broad outline can be found on my YouTube videos and in my book, The Science of Enlightenment. Now, to answer the first part of your question, I wasn't quite clear. When you meant broader, what were you referring, like TM or yoga or? Okay, good. So I call my approach unified mindfulness. Now, for me, the word mindfulness means the cultivation of those 3 core attentional skills. That's what I mean by mindfulness. And if you want to call that meditation, you can call it whatever you want. The unified view says essentially, when you look at all the practices of the world, East, West, ancient, and modern, including the Christian contemplative tradition, Islamic, Jewish, what Native people tend to do, and of course things like Buddhism, Hinduism, and so forth. You look around the world and you'll see that there is a common thread that unites all of these practices. And that common thread relates, remember I said it's all about making dimensional analysis, that's what science is. So there's 3 basic dimensions, independent forms of attentional skill. And you can analyze every meditation tradition of the world in terms of the way in which they talk about those 3 skills and the ways in which they apply those skills. So once again, concentration, power, sensory clarity, and equanimity. So by definition, any system that is going to elevate your base level of these 3 skills counts as a meditation or mindfulness system. It doesn't matter what it's called. So there are many things called mindfulness that actually aren't, and there are many things that are not called meditation that actually are. So that's why it's important to be very clear about our definitions. So that was a great question.
What are the key findings of your research? Like, if you could bullet point your scientific research into this area, what would you like to leave us with in terms of your key findings? Typically what I do is answer questions by asking questions. So I'm going to ask back because we have lots of findings, and I think you're probably, I could talk about functional neuroanatomy, or I could talk about practical this or that, or I could talk about spiritual. Did you have a certain area of key findings you're interested in? Perhaps it's organizational flourishing.
What this means for organizations? Actually, I hate to be disappointing, that's not my area of research. Mine is more just the neuroscience of the individual meditator. However, Juliana did a piece of research with a colleague of mine from Carnegie Mellon, where they did have significant findings, and that was at Scott Lowry's company. Did I get that right, Juliana? Yes. So she can tell you about that and the Carnegie Mellon study. And to be honest, I actually don't know what those findings are. I'm more on the sort of the brain side of things. But talk to Juliana about that. I'm sure she could help you with that. So one last thing. As you may have noticed, my favorite thing in the world is to answer your questions and to talk about this. And I'm here. Just grab me and initiate a conversation if there's anything you want to talk about. And as I say, you can also obviously talk to Juliana. She's a master at what she does. So I'm here, and I like to talk, as you noticed. So thank you very much.